Driving change in maritime. Welcome in another podcast of TechPlay. Today I will have a conversation with Nick Chubb, founder and CEO of Thetius, doing a lot of research in the maritime space, so I am really looking forward to this conversation. Hi Nick, how are you there?
Hi Leon, good to see you.
Good to see you and good to have you on the show. Really looking forward to have a conversation with you on maritime. Maybe to start off, like Nick, can you do a short introduction about yourself? Like, who are we? Who do we have in the studio?
Sure. Yeah, I'm first off to everyone watching and listening. It's really great to be here. Thank you very much, Leon, for the invite. I'm Nick Chubb. I am the founder of Thetius. These days, I work as the strategy director of Thetius as well. We are a highly niche research firm that focuses on helping maritime technology leaders to make strategic decisions. So we provide support to the shipping, ports and terminals and chartering industries. And then we also work with technology suppliers and investors across that landscape as well.
Okay, cool. But let me ask you one question, Nick. Why maritime? How did you end up in the maritime space?
That's a good question. I went to sea at 19. I had the choice to either go to university or to go to sea, and I chose going to sea. I wanted to travel, see the world, all of that sort of stuff. And it was actually only when I went to sea that I realized actually how important the industry is, and that, you know, near enough the supply chain for everything. I would struggle to name any goods that are not impacted by maritime in some way. So my justification is that it's the most important industry in the world, and I'll definitely have that argument with anyone who wants to say different.
Yeah, so from sailing to doing desk research, that's an interesting move.
Yeah, it's a bit of a change for sure.
Yeah, definitely. One of the questions I always like to ask is like, you have been in the industry for a while, and as you know, a lot of people are not aware what is happening on sea and what the maritime industry looks like. What is the thing that people often do not see or do not know about the maritime industry and that they should know?
Oh, what a good question. I would say the main thing for me is that any goods you buy, even if they're grown, just down the road, they rely on the maritime industry for the supply chain. So, for example, locally farmed goods, even though they may have not come on a ship, the farming equipment that you need to use in that farm, the energy that you need to use to run the equipment, to run the farm, all relies on the maritime industry. So our entire society is completely reliant on this industry, and therefore, I think when you start to kind of look like that, you start to look around at all the things around you, whether it's the food you're eating, the beer you're drinking, or you know, your phone, or the phone booth that I'm currently sat in to be able to join you in the studio. It all in some way, shape or form came by sea. And I think when you think of it along those lines, it's just a completely mind-blowing modern miracle that this is possible.
And once you see it, you cannot unsee it as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Well, you're looking at the helping people to make strategic decisions with technology, or using technology in a smart way. Could you elaborate a bit more on what do you see as the trends that are currently affecting the industry? What is happening?
Yeah, I think there's two major things. So everyone gets really excited about the potential impact of AI, and I think it's absolutely right to be excited about that. I think we are at the beginning of one of the biggest changes that humanity see, let alone that our industry has seen. But I think what's most interesting is actually the spaces within the industry that will impact first. And I don't necessarily see that it's the ship that's going to be impacted, or even necessarily the ports and terminals directly that will be impacted first. It's all of the businesses and services that exist around the maritime industry that I think are going to see the biggest impact and the biggest positive or negative disruption from artificial intelligence. Wherever you've got systems that are running that are not safety critical, and where information and knowledge is being shared, I think it opens up a whole range of really exciting opportunities. And so that's the first one. I think the second is obviously that the industry, at the same time as having this massive technological shift, is also facing a massive systemic shift in the need to move over to a net zero industry. And I would say it's kind of day one for everyone in that sense. There is no clear leader either at a kind of national level or at a technological level, and so it's really exciting to see how the industry is starting to respond, and we're starting to see some really exciting developments in things like alternative fuels, in things like optimization technologies that are being driven by this massive shift.
Okay, and if you talk about those examples on optimization technologies, what are the ones that you see are on the verge of bringing the value?
We see at the moment a lot in voyage optimization. A lot of the focus has been on voyage optimization, and actually making the route from A to B as efficient as possible. And I think we're now starting to get to the point where port call optimization is getting real critical mass as well. And I think that's often been the kind of overlooked aspect of optimizing a vessel's voyage, but actually an area where if you can get all of the right stakeholders pulled together, an area where you can have a huge impact because of just the ability to get ships in and out more quickly. So I think we're just getting to the point where port call optimization is sort of, I think, going to have its day, because we're moving. We have gained so much from the efforts in voyage optimization.
Okay. And what is your thought on what is making this change? Port call optimization has been on the agenda already for 10 years or something like that. As long as I'm running TechPlay, port call optimization at least was something that was being discussed. What is changing, or what has changed, and why is it? What is bringing it to the next level?
I think if you wind the clock back 5-10 years and ask, a scheduler in a port or terminal what an API is, you get a kind of blank stare back. Whereas I think now we've got to the point where near enough anyone involved in making these kinds of decisions understands the potential to be able to integrate lots of different platforms and lots of different ways of gathering and collecting data. And just that level of digital maturity is high enough that I think a wider set of stakeholders can engage in these types of platforms. Whereas before, it was a really big investment in just the kind of basic change management to get people to move into doing things in a digital way. I think now we've got to that point, not everywhere, but in a lot of ports and terminals around the world, and a lot of shipping companies around the world have kind of reached that critical point at the same time. That I think we're now getting to a point where that level of collaboration just becomes so much easier because everyone is operating from a kind of a digital minimum standard, if you like. Okay.
And is there an example that stands out for you? Is there a leading example where they already have made the transformation?
Well, it's a good question. I think a lot of really good work has been done in Singapore. I think a lot of fantastic work has been done in and around Rotterdam. Hamburg's another good example. I think if you look at the US, the Port of Virginia, I think is a great example of where digital transformation has been done very, very effectively. I mean, there's near enough in kind of every major hub, there's usually one or two ports that are really pushing the agenda. And then I think there's a lot of smaller ports that up until very recently haven't really been able to make the investments required to do it. But I think we're now getting to that point. So I definitely see that there will be quite a lot of change in the next sort of 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. One of the topics I also discuss quite often in these type of conversation is standardization. What is your take on standardization? Is that the way forward? Is that the path to take, or is it something that will eventually happen?
I think it's such an interesting topic, this, and my opinion on it has probably evolved over the last 3 to 5 years or so. The big problem with standards generally is that if you've got 5 standards and then we decide we need to have a universal standard, what always eventually happens is that we end up with 6 standards that are in use rather than 1. And so there are fantastic examples where standards and creating data standards and rolling them out internationally has done really, really well. And I think even in maritime, I think there are great examples. The Digital Container Shipping Association is a good one, where they were able to pull together enough of a critical mass of the industry to create a standard that it has a decent chance, or standards that have a decent chance of being adopted across the sector. I think where it gets more difficult is where you have technology that's moving very, very fast, and standards, by the nature of them, have to move relatively slow. And so you end up getting to this point where technology potentially moves faster than the standards are able to keep up. And I think we're actually starting to see that with artificial intelligence. There was a few, if you wind the clock back kind of 3, 4, 5 years, there were a few examples of really good workflow automation sort of middleware systems that would be able to take one standard and translate it over to another standard. That I think is going to become very, very common, because we're now at a point where we can move from robotic process automation, where you're working with a bunch of different rules, and if there's an edge case, it just doesn't know what to do and has to send it to a human, which makes it totally unsustainable for transferring data on a large scale, to intelligent process automation, where there's actually a layer of AI that is able to make some of those judgments. And we can now move from, we're getting to a point where you can have 2 different standards in place, and for effectively a middleware to be able to communicate between the 2 of them. And at that point, the requirement to have everyone on a single standard becomes less important. But there are areas absolutely where it can make a big difference. And actually, port call optimization is a good example, where it's very helpful to get stakeholders to coalesce around a particular standard of definitions.
Well, the opinions vary significantly. I was talking to an agent this morning as well, and he said, well, actually, all those standards are stopping me from doing the right thing. It's not only about talking; it's about doing it as well and improving on the flow. I think it will be an interesting mix in those areas. AI might actually help to reduce the need of having or defining a very strict standard in that sense.
The need to have a standard absolutely acts as if you like, as a bit of a choke on innovation. And I think it makes a big difference if you're able to move to a scenario where you don't necessarily need to have the standard in place. It can make a big difference to the speed that you can innovate at. So those areas where perhaps standards are or having a single very strict standard is less important, I expect to see move very, very fast in the coming few years.
And in the research, and we're now discussing the topic of AI as well, what type of questions is the industry asking themselves, or what kind of questions do you see arising? Is that on the use of AI, or are there other things that are brought to the table in that sense?
A lot of the work we're doing at the moment is where we've got industry stakeholders coming to us asking for support to put together, for example, an AI strategy. Often that's driven by the C-suite saying we need to do something about AI, but actually we tend to recommend just taking a few steps back and first off just taking stock of where the organization is from a digital standpoint or a technology standpoint in a more general sense. It's very, very easy to, particularly now as so much of it is available through just connecting up a few different APIs, it's very, very easy to just chuck AI at really bad data, and then surprise, surprise, what you get is bad AI. So if you've not taken some of those more foundational steps to get your house in order when it comes to data processing, data storage, how you maintain the quality of data, all of that sort of stuff, throwing AI on top won't necessarily solve anything for you, and it can, in some instances, make things a lot worse. So the way that we tend to approach these questions is first with a thorough assessment of where the organization is at. Then we move to a phase of discovery and looking at what's possible and what may be possible, and kind of coming down the track over the next 3 to 5 years. And then we move to some kind of alignment, getting everyone together where we can kind of coalesce around a plan that meets the organization where it's at, and then looks to where the organization wants to go. And then we can actually put together a realistic plan for this sort of stuff.
It's an observation and also a question I would like you to reflect upon. What I do see is that people are using AI anyway in many places of the process, throwing in charter parties, asking questions instead of reading it, etc. So is this going to help this process of AI adoption? Is this the way like WhatsApp has been introduced into the shipping industry, or is this going to be a fundamental blocker in one or the other way because of compliance reasons? Because of I'm curious if you did reflect on that part or did get those type of questions.
Yeah, I think it's really important that organizations recognize that this is happening. And it is happening in your organization, whether you want it to or not, just by the nature of the tools. And I think WhatsApp's a great example. You know, it used to be the case that doing business communication on WhatsApp, would be kind of outside of a compliance channel. But what you realize, what people started to realize a few years ago, is just that everyone was doing it. So it's better to actually recognize that and put the right policies in place to make sure the organization is doing things in a way that protects your data and in a way that reduces the risk of compliance issues than kind of sweeping it under the rug. There was an interesting case study a few weeks ago that was in the news where a UK law firm had just outright banned tools like ChatGPT because they'd seen that there was a massive uptick in usage. And they weren't 100% sure on the efficacy of what was being produced. And so they just brought in an outright ban. And I think the problem with that is it then pushes it underground and it becomes a kind of shadow IT set of tools where it's still being used. It's just more likely to now be on people's personal devices. And then that just throws up a whole load of other questions around compliance and data security, data integrity, and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's important that organizations act on this. It's important that organizations create sensible policies on this, but it's also important that organizations recognize that these tools are changing knowledge work very, very quickly, and your employees are already using them.
Yeah. And we touched upon sustainability already also, like it is getting less of a push. But it started to impact, it is starting to impact within the industry as well. What are your views on this? Is what is happening at this point in time in the world, is that going to slow down? Is it going to stop? Or has the uptick been that big that it will continue?
That's a really good question. I think for every swing of the pendulum has a counter swing, and I think we're probably in a bit of a counter swing at the moment when it comes to things like decarbonization and sustainability. I think it's important to recognize one that, and this isn't necessarily a political view. It's more just the consensus of the scientific community that decarbonization is required. We absolutely do need to move to net zero to protect the future of the human race. And so there is a pretty big need on the industry to take action there, and that has been recognized over the course of, it's not a recent thing. It's taken 15, 20 years for the IMO to get to a point where there is a decarbonization strategy in place. I think the likelihood of that decarbonization strategy at the IMO level being undone by any particular political winds in any particular country is pretty unlikely. So I think the industry, the maritime industry, is going to have to remain committed to that goal. And it may just be that the level of commitment at the moment may get reduced. There are other things going on in the world as well that I think has made those investments more difficult. back in 2021, 22, the container sector, the freight rates were so high that there was so much cash that the container sector could deploy that a lot of commitments were made to put cash into decarbonization. It's going to take time for those commitments to actually come forward and to actually turn into new technologies that are coming to fruition. So, broadly speaking, I'm pretty optimistic about it. I think we have a mammoth task as an industry to be able to move to alternative fuels, but also we have a huge role to play as an enabler of the decarbonization of the global energy system as well. You know, maritime is an enormous component of the existing energy system, and I see that the shipping industry has a really important and very exciting role to play in enabling the world to move to net zero. So no, I don't really see that it will long term be materially impacted by kind of what's going on in the world at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing that hopefully will start to affect is the drop of price of alternative fuels or alternative energy sources. In that sense, moving away from the fossil. But yeah, it is it's hard to predict how long. I guess in that sense. I think the other thing I noticed personally in the solution that we as TechPlay are bringing to the market is change and resistance to change, especially in adopting newer technologies. I think there are some fundamental barriers, like we were discussing before, like alternative fuels, and there's a physical limit to it, but also there is this people element to it. Any observations or things in that area that you see like that are happening within the industry?
I think the first thing to say is that 90% of technology problems are not technology problems. They are people and change management problems. Yeah. And so, you know, a lot of the stuff that we talk about and have talked about over the last few years around, you know, the potential for digital transformation, those technologies have been around for 10, 15 years. It's just that we haven't yet got to the point where the desire to change overcomes that kind of inertia that exists in any organization. And I think change is uncomfortable. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's maritime or anywhere else. Change is uncomfortable. People don't necessarily want to embrace change. People like the way that things happen. And so as technologists, I think the onus is on you to paint the picture of how, if you're able to overcome the difficulty of making that change, that life can be 10x better. And I think that's probably what needs to happen to make digital transformation work really well. Is you need to first get that alignment of people, and you need to be able to create the vision that actually you're not just going to make something incrementally better. You're going to fundamentally transform a process that will make their lives significantly better if they're able to go through the pain of the change.
Yeah. Okay. So do you see the nature of your business changing as well, more towards like I'm going to be a change consultant or helping people to drive that change? Or is that already embedded in what you at Thetius are delivering?
We kind of see our core mission as equipping every maritime technology leader with the information they need to make the right decisions. And so a huge part of that is unearthing what best practice looks like, what good information looks like around making technology work. So it's not just the tech; it is that entire change management process. But we are first and foremost we're a research house, and so you know what we like spending our time doing is going in and really understanding these issues, understanding why people might be resistant to change, and then producing research that helps people to make decisions about how to overcome that. We're not like a kind of hands-on consultancy that's going to go in and run a change management process. But if you're struggling to unearth like the kind of why to the whole thing, then absolutely that's an area we can help.
Yeah. Maritime world is also a global industry. If we look about the technology decisions that are being made all around the globe, do you see differences how technology is being used over the different continents, different areas. Any trends or significant differences in these areas?
Yeah, I think there are clusters around the world where I think different technologies shine through in different ways. I think Rotterdam is a fantastic ship owning, ship management hub. You've also got the port there as well, and so it kind of naturally becomes a cluster for those types of technologies. In the UK and London, we've got, I think, some of the best insurtech companies, and that's sort of built around the fact that we have this fantastic marine insurance industry in the UK. You go out to New York, and there's fantastic fintech companies that are supporting, for example, the digitization of bills of lading and things like that. So yeah, I think depending on where you go in the world and depending on the kind of existing maritime cluster, you end up getting really exciting technologies kind of shining through in each of those areas before they expand internationally. But one thing I would say is for us, the vast majority of our clients are international, and that's one of the most exciting things about the maritime industry generally, is that you just get access to this amazing wealth of cool places to go and see, and people from all sorts of different cultures to be able to work with and interact with. It's really exciting.
Yeah, I've noticed quite some differences. If you look at the Arabic world, or you look at the Asian world, the European world, the American world, or the Latin world, I do see also different ways technology is being applied, or how actually processes are being orchestrated. There are completely different ways in how to use that technology as well. I think it's culturally different, has to do with the setup of the country and these kind of things. But it is amazing to see also, like even within within the same company, where the location of the branch does have so much impact.
Yeah, and definitely if you're, there are definitely areas where I would say, it's not a great place to go and trial, a highly experimental new technology, just because of the, almost the kind of legacy of the existing industry. And I think the Middle East is a great example of a region where there's so much infrastructure being built today that there's almost so many kind of greenfield opportunities that you can come in and apply technology from day one, whereas a lot of more established European and North American kind of maritime centers just have this kind of long tail of history, that coming back to that question around change management and inertia, there's so much more you need to overcome before you can bring something new in, and so that it definitely does make a difference.
Yeah. All right, Nick. I'm looking at the time. I think I really would love to go on for another half an hour, but I know we don't have the time for that. I really would like to thank you for being on the podcast and participating and sharing your insights and knowledge. Thank you very much, and it was great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for the invite.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks. Speak soon.
Good. Thanks. Bye.